What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you once again without my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes, but I am pleased, grateful, and super excited to welcome back Mo Dakhil to the Hardwood Knocks podcast, who was, I assume this is at the top of his LinkedIn profile and resume. He used to co-host this podcast with me for a minute, but now he's writing for Bleacher Report. He's covering the NBA for The Athletic, podcasting for The Athletic. He's also done and hosted shows for the NBA itself. He's all over the place. If you haven't seen his threads when he does game clips on Twitter, when he still does them, you need to check those out. I've always found them super helpful when I go through them. Follow him on Twitter, forever Twitter, at Mo Dakhil _NBA. That's at MODAKHIL _NBA. The link to his profile will be in the podcast and YouTube description. Mo, it's been like maybe almost closer to 2 years since we last spoke.
It's been 2 years. You've kicked me off and then have never brought me back since. And I was surprised that all of a sudden I got a text message and I was like, oh, who is this?
Well,
and then said,
it helped that it seemed like you remembered that you had my number, because I felt like it was always one way. I was always texting you to catch up. And then
no.
And I was like, oh, Mo didn't delete my number.
No. We're going to pull this up now. Nope, we're not. I'm not here for that bullshit. Talked about
I think if you go through, you'll see that I probably texted you to see how you were doing. Never heard any. Mo just would ghost me.
Okay, our last text. Oh, you're going to get crushed.
How?
Because I was the last one to text.
Well, that was after we talked on a Bleacher
Report
show.
No. And I will derail this podcast to point this out. October 10th, 2022. You sent a message. And then I responded. You asked me how my dog was doing. I told you how he was doing. And then that was it. I had sent the last message.
Yeah, but it's not like you checked in.
Neither did you.
I did. I want to know how Luca was doing, and that's my first question. How is Luca with a C doing?
Luca with a C is doing great. We just got back from Santa Barbara. He came with us. It was a fun little dog vacation for him. He barked at every bike in Santa Barbara, which also caused me a lot of problems. But he was great. He's doing great. I'm doing great, even though Dan never texts me to find out. Only texts me to find out how the dog is doing back in 2022.
Well, I mean, I think everyone who listens to the podcast knows that's all I care about is how people's dogs are doing. So that's
fair.
Glad to see he's thriving. Congrats on your pending nuptials that are coming up. Wish you and your bride, who has questionable taste in partners, nothing but the best. But I am excited, genuinely excited for you.
Thank you. And Luca sealed the deal, so that was kind of the.
Oh, see, it's the dogs, man. They know how to get it done.
Package deal.
How are you doing during this? The transaction tumult has slowed. There's still a couple of nice names on the market, and we probably have some trades that'll eventually go through. But aside from waiting to see when the DeJounte Murray and Mikal Bridges trades were actually going to be completed, and yes, they were completed, we've kind of slowed down now. We're getting into the summer league portion of the offseason. How is it treating you?
Great. There's not as much crazy frenzy anymore in terms of, I know it sucks and we're bored with all of that, but it's also kind of like, I don't have to be by my phone right now because all the major free agents are signed. It wasn't like, waiting for LeBron to announce or KD to announce and going like, okay, I'm going to jump in the shower, but it's going to be a super quick shower. I'm going to be real quick with everything and clean up and then get out and boom, check my phone as soon as I get out of the shower. And it's like, oh, LeBron announces he's going to the Lakers. I missed it. Oh, it's all that stuff. But ultimately, I think it's pretty slow. It's pretty boring. But I kind of thought that was going to happen this summer.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we get like sort of a midsummer blockbuster trade. But the way that the teams are still trying to figure out how to navigate the salary cap, the second apron, or the fear of the second apron, I thought it was going to neuter at least like the free agency game. I still do have PTSD from it's dating back to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard when they ended up with the Clippers. That's what still prompts me. Like I'll wake up in the middle of the night and check my phone, or I feel like I have to have both my phones near me, no matter what time of the year it is. That and the Kyrie Irving trade, when he requested a trade from the Cavs, those stuck with me. But I am excited to pick your brain about some teams, transactions that we just sort of find fascinating. And the first thing I wanted to start with, because we haven't had a chance to talk about on this podcast since it happened, DeMar DeRozan is a Sacramento King, not something I even would have thought about predicting at the beginning of the offseason. They end up basically sending out second-round picks, cash, Chris Duarte, Harrison Barnes, and a 2030 unprotected pick swap to end up bringing him in on a 3-year, $76 million deal. The first 2 years are fully guaranteed. I think there's like a partial guarantee on the third year. I think $59 million in total, if I'm not mistaken, is fully guaranteed out of the 76. What do you make of his? I want to start there. What do you make of his overall fit on Sacramento?
It's interesting. I think, it's an upgrade for them in the sense of like, hey, we needed another creator. And, DeRozan has become more than just a scorer. He's done a great job as a playmaker. We know what happens when he gets to the elbow. I think it's a smart move for them. It's a definite upgrade. Like, I don't want to just poo-poo this. This is a good upgrade for the Kings. They got a veteran presence. I mean, they got probably one of the best locker room guys in the NBA. I haven't seen anybody say a bad thing about DeMar DeRozan in terms of being a good teammate and being a good guy in general. And I think, also former Trojan, so fight on. It's just what we do. It's what we produce, good people. The ultimate don't
What's Matt Leonard doing these days? Do you want to stand by that, or
don't research anything? And his name's Matt Leonard, not Leonard, but that's a whole, again, different story. But I think he's a good fit in terms of just what he can bring offensively and bring a little more versatility to their offense. I have questions for this team defensively. I have questions for this team, even on the offensive end. I think this is a team that doesn't shoot the three ball enough. Mm-hmm. And I think bringing in a guy like DeMar DeRozan does not increase the amount of three balls you're shooting, but kind of lowers it. I was disappointed in their offseason last year. I felt like I have a problem with teams staying still in the NBA now, because I think in the NBA you just can't stay still. You have to be constantly.
The Nuggets got rid of KCP. You think they needed to change it up? I get it.
No, yeah, okay. We'll get to them in a minute.
Did you miss that? You did not.
You and your dumb stuff you do try to pin me one way or another. I think it's just more of, it'll be interesting. It's an upgrade. Like, they needed to make a change. They needed to kind of improve. They did veteran presence, all that fun stuff. Having Malik Monk continue to come off the bench. I thought he had a great season for them. I know everybody's like, oh, DeMar has improved defensively and things like that. I really worry about this team defensively. I think this puts them in the range of a possible playoff team, but I think more likely a play-in team.
I read it as, I still don't know where I land up on the fit. I think the 2030 pick swap is fucking with me, to be honest. I don't know. I just felt like I wouldn't have given that up. But I am more intrigued.
That went to San Antonio, right?
Yeah, they're just collecting them, and the Thunder are collecting. I mean, San Antonio has to have the market cornered on like any pick commitments post 2028 at this point, like because they got some swaps and they have that Minnesota pick.
I don't know. I feel like Oklahoma still has more picks.
Oh,
they have picks that they're not supposed to have. Like in 2050, I feel like they have somebody's unprotected pick. Like it's.
There's going to be a draft where half of the first rounders are just going to Utah and OKC. I don't know what draft it's going to be, but it's going to end up happening. I'm intrigued by it. I was wondering did you take it as, I read it as two things, aside from everything that you said, because you're talking about the defenses. I did read it as a hashtag fuck defense at this point. Like, our offense kind of pulled back last year. A large part of that was they dealt with injuries. Herter had a down season. And then the Sabonis without Fox minutes were not great, which was kind of a departure from the year before. But I kind of just read it as like, well, we're just going to really soup up our offense because that's what had us, like that's how we got here to where people expected us to make the playoffs. But I also kind of took it as a vote of confidence in two players, Keegan Murray for what he did defensively last year, maybe even a vote of confidence in Keon Ellis defensively. But I also took it as kind of a vote of confidence in De'Aaron Fox at both ends of the floor. I thought he wasn't as stiff defensively last year. I don't know if you disagree with that. And then just, he's become a good enough shooter or off-ball player to where I'm immediately concerned. My biggest concern is like, well, what does the spacing in the offense look like during Sabonis, Fox, and Sabonis, DeRozan, Fox minutes? And it's like, well, maybe just Fox is versatile enough at both ends to where I'm reading too much into that. And so have you given any consideration to maybe that element of it?
It's a bit hard, like when you look at those three, because you're not taking the ball out of Fox's hands. Right. And listen, he's improved as a shooter. Kudos to him. Good job as off the dribble shooting threes and things like that. If I'm a team, I'm still like daring him to just go under. Still going to try to just go under screens a couple of times. Maybe I'll mix it up and go over a few times, but I'm not going to be, it's not to the point where I'm so afraid of that 3-point shot, because I'm more afraid of him getting to the rim with that lightning quick speed that I'm kind of more willing to kind of concede that three. But then it's harder because it's like, all right, so DeRozan, you're going to space. Cool. That's a blessing for the defense. That's one more guy in the paint because they, whatever, kick out threes, DeRozan's going to have to take some of those, have to make some of those. But again, as a defense, you're just going to be like, we're going to live with that. And I think that's more of a thing. And it's going to be more of an issue come playoff time than regular season, I think is kind of the deal. But spacing will be a premium for them. Like, they're going to have a hard time figuring that stuff out. I love Keegan Murray. I think he's got a chance to be really, really good. I'd like to see them give him a little more opportunities at the elbow and be a little more of a playmaker from there and develop that and flex
That's
that
not
muscle.
happening.
It's not, but that's what I want, Dan. But like him having to step out and shoot more threes, come off pin downs, which he does really well. Like, they're going to have to do a lot more of that stuff. It just gets interesting. And I think the DeRozan piece is going to take some work from Mike Brown in terms of how to kind of put together a fluid offense with that, because there's not going to be, spacing is going to be a very difficult thing for them to come across.
Which is also why I was happy. I know he's coming off shoulder surgery and didn't have the best year, and maybe they'll still move him in a subsequent deal. But you brought Monk back, and the fact that it was Kevin Huerter was not used as one of the matching salaries, I thought that was beneficial to them because they needed that floor space. And it's a team, they shot threes really well last year. I think they were third in percentage, but they were like 16th or 17th in the frequency with which they shot from three. Like you said, DeRozan's not going to take them. We know Sabonis isn't going to take a ton. So I thought it was important they kept Huerter. So I remain very optimistic about the offense, but I am with you with the defensive questions. The way I'm reading this is that I don't know that they actually care. Like, maybe they really do believe in Fox and Ellis and Murray, but when you do look at this team, though, is there like an archetype of player or a specific player, or just something that's, I know you mentioned shooting, but like if you had your druthers, if they could add one thing or one type of player that would maybe tie this all together in a more firm fashion, does any, again, archetype sort of spring to mind?
Are the Knicks going to trade Mikal Bridges to them? Or, I mean, like, that's probably kind of the guy. I think that would have been a nice little kind of like a 3-and-D type guy for them, is probably more what they need than anything else. And it's nice if they can do stuff off the dribble. I think one thing we learned from the Boston Celtics is just having so many guys that can, handle the ball and attack is really important. We see it with OKC and what they're trying to build. I think that's kind of more the same of what you're hoping you're going to get. And you're going to hope that Keon Ellis is going to develop some of that, and show some of those things. I think it's going to come down to just defense, and they can sit there and punt on defense all they want. But I'm just going to tell you, man, like, you're not going to win a lot in the NBA if you're just not going to give up, if you're not going to get stops.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Their goal probably shouldn't be a championship because they're not a championship level team right now, but their goal should be playoffs. But like, they need to pull wins. So maybe the attitude is right. And hey, like, screw it. Let's just go with the offense and be a flame out in the first round. But like, it's hard for me when teams just kind of punt on defense, because I just don't think that's a way in which you can feel comfortable that you're fully going to survive in that. The long run, I just feel like it's going to hurt you.
Would like there'd have to be other framework. Would someone, like, if you had to give up Kevin Huerter but got Dorian Finney-Smith back, does something like that move you, or are you more worried about the then 3-point volume you're conceding going from Kevin Huerter to Dorian Finney-Smith?
Well, look how bad he shot it from three. I'm not worried about his 3-point volume at that point. I know he might have a better year this time around, but like, Dorian Finney-Smith can knock a couple down. Like, I'm not too worried about that. Like, that's actually a nice name and a good comp. The guy actually who I think we should really keep an eye on for being on the move at some point is Cam Johnson from Brooklyn. I think that could be a guy that could also help them. Maybe a little too similar to Harrison Barnes, who they just traded, but I think that's a guy that can kind of be
better defensively for sure.
Oh yeah. But I think, and maybe not as good offensively, but can definitely stretch the floor. I feel like that's a guy I would try to keep an eye on. If I was Sacramento, I'd probably kick the tires and see what the asking price is.
What about someone like, do you think a Kuzma could still help this team, or is he not improved enough defensively? Denny Avdia would have been dynamite for them. They were
Kuzma can help any team. I'll be honest with you. Like, the race to get Kuzma should be pretty high If you're Washington, all the moves they're making should be guys that they can turn into picks,
Mhm.
and going forward for them. But Kuzma would be can help any team. I think defensively and offensively. It's whether he wants to accept that role. Like we saw the fact that he had a chance to be traded to Dallas last year and didn't want to be that guy. And so I think the question is, as long as he wants to be, as long as he's willing to accept that role and maybe sacrifice some shots and play a little more defense, I think he'd be great in that role. I think that's the role he's perfect for in the NBA. And I think that's something that the Kings, again, another name that I wouldn't think would be a bad name for the Kings.
I would like to see them at least make a smaller type move where it's, can we just get Torrey Craig from the Bulls or Jay Sean Tate from the Rockets because their rotation's so crowded? Just someone who figures to be not necessarily an upgrade, not going to be an upgrade over Ellis or Murray, but just like, can we get another defensive minded body on the perimeter in here? I would feel a lot better because I don't hate the DeRozan team, but it wasn't like when I saw it and the terms and looking at the fit, it doesn't necessarily feel like a home run either, even though it's a very clear talent upgrade.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a single, hey, we upgraded our talent. We've improved our chances going into the season next year. It's one of those things that's promising, but it wasn't like I was running through the streets going like, oh my God, like how are the other teams going to respond to it? Like I think that's kind of the way I looked at it. It was a good move for Sacramento. No question about it to me. Maybe they did give up a little bit too much with that 2030 unprotected pick swap, but that's kind of the price to play nowadays. And I think those are the situations they're in. And I think that's going to be, ultimately we'll just see kind of how it plays out for them. I just don't think their ceiling's higher than like a 5 seed.
The Golden State Warriors, fascinating to me. I'm wondering, just given everything that happened where Clay leaves, and that seems like it was in the works for a while, you waive CP3 instead of making a move with his contract. You're able to basically turn that Klay Thompson traded play. You're not basically, you turn Klay Thompson leaving into, you get Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield in that same, what was it, like a 90 team transaction at the end of the day. So you have Buddy Hield, Kyle Anderson, D'Anthony Melton, you use your mid-level on. You have the young guys that might be ready for bigger roles. Steph is still there. Maybe Dre won't try and kill anybody on the court next season and get to play and won't get suspended. What do you just make of this team after looking at the dust has now settled, we're assuming, unless there's a bigger move left in them? What do you just make of the Warriors at this point?
Yeah, it's a really interesting squad in the sense of I think they've kind of recovered nicely after losing Clay. Like I think, Buddy, Melton, and Anderson, he went to UCLA, so we don't like him as much. But
you hate Russell Westbrook, Kevin Love, Lonzo Ball.
Yeah.
All right, just making sure.
Like, what are we talking about?
Didn't I go without saying? I apologize.
The only good Bruin, well, there's two, Bill Walton and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The rest, anyways, you got me sidetracked. I got myself sidetracked.
Let's name all the Bruins that Mo dislike. I will say Bill Walton's a favorite around here. One of our Discord users came up with a segment called "Who is Bill Walton talking about?" and he fed us Bill Walton quotes, and then we had to guess who Bill Walton was. It was just like, I love Bill Walton. R.I.P. Bill Walton. Rest in power. I love that guy. But so you picked it. If you had to like only one or two Bruins, I think you did pick the correct two.
Yes. I know I did. I think the Warriors kind of just they rebounded nicely. And I think Anderson's a real nice pickup for them. I'm just curious how much you could play Anderson and Draymond together. Because I don't think that's a high number. I'll be curious if Buddy Hield can, show that he can play well. I mean, he was pretty good in Indiana, but he was awful in Philly. And I think that's, kind of why his market was so low. I like the Anthony Melton. Those are nice pieces. I don't know if any of them are such game changers in a way where we're going to talk about them as contenders because we're just so used to talking about the Golden State Warriors as contenders. But I don't know if that really kind of put them in that level where you feel like, hey, man, this team really has a legitimate chance to contend. I think those are nice pieces, but I don't think they're still missing something that's going to be a big chunk.
Do they have the potential to be let's assume relatively good health from Melton had the back stuff. Gary Payton always seems like he's dealing with something. And of course, Draymond, he's a suspension risk. He's getting a little older. But do they have like the potential to be really nasty defensively when you're looking at Dre and Trace Jackson Davis, even Kuminga, Slow-Mo, Melton, GP2, just a lot of names. You look at them and it feels like they could wind up being a really feisty defensive team. Imagine if Andrew Wiggins doesn't suck this year too.
Yeah, imagine that. I think the problem with that is like a lot of those guys also are kind of hamstrung offensively.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Like, so it's like, yeah, they could have an amazing defense, but they ain't scoring. I mean, they have to have an amazing defense if with a lot of those guys on the floor. It's all those guys and Steph. Like, okay, cool. Draymond's the playmaker. Steph's got to still run off screens and make a lot of things happen. The problem is, and I think this is the thing that's going to worry me about the Warriors, is that it's so Steph dependent.
Mm-hmm.
And like we've kind of seen it, like he tends to wear down, and that's not a shot at him. It's a long ass season, and he's got to carry everybody offensively. I think is a bit difficult. Like that'd be my concerns with the Warriors. And so I when I look at them, I go in like, Draymond on the floor, you always have a chance to be a really good defense. He's just so good defensively. Even, as he's aging and getting a little older, he's still right there in a lot of those places, and his IQ is so high. But I think the pressure offensively on Steph to kind of make everything happen is what's going to be the downfall for this team right now. It's going to really wear them down, and I think wear him down and put them in a bad situation. Like that's kind of the stuff I'd be wary of if I was the Warriors.
Who is the second best player on this team at generating their own shot right now? Is it Andrew Wiggins?
God, like that's such a scary prospect. I guess the hope is Jonathan Kuminga improves so much that he could, but like I don't know if that's gonna happen. Like, man, like let's just put it this way: it's Steph, and then there's like 2 or 3 tiers down, and then that's whoever number 2 is.
I think the other thing that makes me uncomfortable with this team is that even if you see an acquisition that would maybe fill some of the bot, like they've been linked to Larry Markkinen. Let's just assume they can get Larry Markkinen. I love that fit. But like, does that elevate them into the like contender tier? I just don't know. I can't identify because it also feels like they need like a different type of 5-man. They could probably use some backup playmaking still. They could definitely use more like proven shooters. So I can't identify a realistic player or players that would be like, okay, like we're going to look at the Warriors as they're definitely a top 6 team in the West.
Yeah, I think we kind of forget how good and how deep those Warriors teams back in the day was, even before KD, right? Like you had Sean Livingston, you had Andre Iguodala, Harrison Barnes was a young pup in that stuff, and I think you had 8-man deep roster, and I think that's kind of a pretty impressive situation to be in. And they just lost all that now, like. Their backup point guard, like, listen, I like Pods. I think he's been great, for them. Like, okay, he comes in to be the backup point guard. All right, I'm fine. It's not like it's not like, okay, now we got to deal with him coming in, or at least like, hey, he's gonna keep them on the level till Steph comes back. You almost feel like, all right, when Steph goes off the floor, here's our time to go on a run. And I just think that's kind of the problem for the Warriors that I think they're going to have to really figure out. They're going to be one of those teams, I think, where like when Steph's on the floor, their net rating is going to be unbelievable. And when he's off the floor, it's going to be so bad. And that swing is going to be wild. And I think that's something that's like just got to be a real concern, like how you handle all that. It's where like if Markkinen comes in, you can at least feel like he can keep the offense running through him when Steph's not on the floor and still have a competent offense, still be able to maintain things. And I think that's going to be the problem. The Warriors are going to have to figure out. And I think years of not actually developing guys and nailing developments. And I'm going way back. Patrick McCaw,
Jordan Bell, remember he was a thing.
Jordan Bell, McKinney, like all of these names that kind of come and gone through all of the Warrior system, like not having somebody kind of break through in a way to really kind of open stuff up where you feel like confident and having at least somebody off the bench that can give you some pop is really going to hurt them in the long run.
The Clippers, another team that kind of reoriented their roster. I'm curious to ask you this first. Whose framing or version of events are you more inclined to buy? The Clippers saying they were just too afraid of the second apron, even though they offered Paul George a contract that would have put them in the second apron, or Paul George saying that they started negotiations at 2 years, 60 million, and that it took forever to them to even come up to the Kawhi number.
Yeah, I think it's kind of there's always a little bit of truth in both of them. I think it's silly. The Clippers kind of just saying we were afraid of the second apron. One, don't admit it. What are you doing?
No, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I think they were lying, so that's why I have an issue with it. I kind of respect what the Warriors did in the sense that I think it was February, Joey Lightyears went on Tim Kawakami's podcast on The Athletic, I believe, and said that the Warriors weren't just trying to duck these aprons; they were trying to get out of the tax entirely this upcoming summer. I think that sucks because Steph is still so good, and I want to see him compete for titles. But I respect the actual honesty versus the Clippers versions of events that just don't sort of compute because it's all right. You were worried about the second apron, but you paid James Harden, you extended Kawhi, you offered Paul George a contract in the end that would have put you in the second apron. And it's even goes back to the Nuggets where it's okay. Like you could have, if you really wanted to, you could have ducked the second apron while still giving KCP that contract and then figured out the rest later, which is, by the way, what you should do when your current team is a title contender. The Clippers, had they just said like, we just don't think this core has it anymore, I would have respected that more because that should factor into the decision-making for sure.
If they said that, that's different. I just think it's no fan wants to hear, especially when your owner is Steve Ballmer and can buy every team in the NBA. You don't want to hear we were afraid of the second apron. And it goes more than just the taxes. I know all the restrictions and the stuff that it hamstrings you on what you can do as a team. But you're right. Like just the pure fact of like the contract, if they had signed Paul George, would have put them in the second apron if he agreed to their 2-year deal. I think it's interesting. When I look at the line of events, I probably tend to agree more with Paul George. I just think it was dumb of the Clippers from the beginning. You had to have known when we signed Kawhi Leonard to the 3-year, $150 million, the offer should have been the same exact to Paul George. Like it just doesn't make sense otherwise. They're in a weird situation now where it's like a quasi reset, but they don't add their picks. Oklahoma City has their picks for what feels like an eternity. And I think you're in just kind of a weird position. Like, I just think it was a poor miscalculation from their end. They should have known, like, this is how it was going to play out. And just from the beginning, just would have said, I would have sat both of those two guys down. You guys are both getting the same exact contract. And that's the end of it, and let them know you guys are on equal footing because you both have missed the same amount of games, it feels like, as Clippers. So it kind of works out in that regard. So I think you're in a interesting position for them. But now they got to figure out how they're going to retool that team. It's going to be really weird.
And that's also my big thing is if you're going to use the cost of the roster as an excuse, I get no fan. First of all, no fan, you're right, should want to hear billionaires complain about that. But the Warriors at least then went ahead and kind of did stuff with this magical flexibility underneath the apron. If you're the Clippers or the Nuggets specifically, it's like, well, show me like what you're doing that makes sense as an alternative here. And with the Clippers, I guess that's what I'm curious to ask you is, okay, they bring back James Harden. They have Derek Jones, Nicholas Batum, and his never-ending attempt apparently to run away from Paul George. Paul George is in LA. He gets traded to Philly. He leaves Philly when Paul George goes to Philly, but he's back. They're also trying to, I guess, build like a past and present do they deserve a second chance team? They have Kevin Porter Jr. on this roster now. We do know that they were linked to Miles Bridges, at least somewhat loosely. But looking at the roster they actually have in place now, what do you kind of make of this product?
It's just weird. Like, I just don't know. There was that run when this team was, fully healthy and they were like, ridiculous.
Yeah.
I forget what the numbers were, but they looked like the second best team in the NBA. I think they blew out Boston in Boston. They looked incredibly tough. And then the bottom fell out. And it wasn't even injuries, but like the bottom fell out and just like their intensity dropped and everything that went with it. And what made them so good in that run was gone and impossible to get. I just have a hard time. Like, look, Derek Jones Jr. was a good pickup. Batum, he's always going to have a special place with the Clipper fan base. He's, and basically everywhere he goes, everybody loves Nico.
Do you think Charlotte feels the same way?
No, but are they even in the NBA at this point?
Oh, I mean, you're talking LaMelo Ball fanatic over here. Will stand for him.
Of course, you would be a LaMelo Ball fanatic.
Not all the stuff we've heard about off the court, both on and off the record, but what he does on the court, I think he has the potential to be transcended. But please carry on. You're supposed to slander the Timberwolves, not the Hornets. What are you doing here?
No, well, first off, everybody gets it. No one's safe, including you. What he does on the court's going to be transcendent. Like, is doing what? Jacking up 35-foot threes and
come on, them. The live dribble playmaking, the full court vision.
That's fine. It's good. He's skilled. All of that stuff. I have no question about it. But transcendence is a different plane than what you're talking about. Just because their play-by-play guy does a great job elevating his voice when LaMelo does something and makes it a funner clip doesn't mean he's transcendent. But I will
be in your text message box once LaMelo Ball makes an All-NBA team or wins
I have
MVP.
I have no doubt you'll never be in my box again. Then but I just feel like when you look at the stuff that they've kind of tried to pull together, like those are nice signings, those are nice names and whatnot. Like this team is taking a step back. Mm-hmm. You're not going to replace a dude like Paul George just with Derrick Jones Jr., with Batum, with Porter. You're just not going to. And I think, and however you feel about the whole Porter situation, that's a whole other side I wouldn't want to touch if I was a team. But like, I just don't see how it gets so much better. And then you have to wonder, like, okay, cool. Like, it was great. We got what they get? Like 68, 78 games out of Kawhi. Like, they got a healthy Kawhi for the regular season, missed the playoffs for the most part. Like, what are you going to get from Kawhi next season? Like, it's such a question mark. And then if you're bad, it doesn't help you. Like I just think they're in such a difficult position. I don't know where this team goes. They took a step back, and the West is going to kind of pass them by. I think they're going to be feeling a world of hurt if Kawhi gets hurt or can't play all that much.
My next question about them is twofold. Would you, one, agree that this team has a litany of holes on it, just functionally? And then two, what is like the biggest concern on the court about them, not including health availability from Kawhi?
Yeah, I think the biggest concern I would say for them is just, okay, how are we going to kind of just our offense and structure? Where are we going to replace Paul? Derrick Jones Jr. can't run off pin downs the way Paul George can and get it and then make something happen, right? And attack full court. None of the guys they brought in. So now it's okay. So now it's more on James. It's more on Kawhi to kind of contribute on a nightly basis. They have become easier to defend for the most part. And as good as the Harden Zubac pick and roll is, like, it's still not enough where it's like you feel so worried. Like, I just think this team is just kind of going nowhere at this point.
I will say they've had the type of offseason that made me Google James Harden MVP odds because of how central he's going to be to everything they do. All of a sudden, not that he wasn't before, but to not have like Paul George there and then the Kawhi injury stuff. So I'm with you in the sense I don't really understand what they're going to be, but I do think their offense is going to maybe, I guess if Harden's healthy, it'll be fine, but it feels like they might be better set up to succeed defensively when you look at the personnel that they brought in than offensively, for sure.
Yeah, I think defensively they're going to be pretty good. It's just going to be, it's almost like, can we get some of the offense from Sacramento down to LA and some of the defense from the Clippers up to Sacramento, and you probably have two pretty functional teams. I think defensively they'll be in good position. The James Harden MVP stuff was pretty funny there, Dan. That's those days are
Google.
gone.
I didn't say bet on it. I'm not that stupid.
Well, if you do, just send me the money.
No, I got you. What have you made of the Spurs offseason? It's been fascinating. So they trade number 8. Becomes Rob Dillingham. That goes to Minnesota. They get the 2030 pick swap and a 2031 pick. They take on Harrison Barnes, who kind of helps their team or works for their team. They also get another pick swap as part of that equation and 2031, I believe. And then like they sign CP3. We still don't know the official deal because the math is being worked out with the Harrison Barnes trade. I've seen it framed two ways, that the Spurs got better and now they're set up to make upgrades kind of on the fly mid-season or before the season, or that they're stealthily tanking again because they can go to Victor Wembanyama and say, look, we got some veterans in here. Like we're building slowly, gradually, but that they're still going to be bad. Where do you sort of land on like what this team's immediate angle is?
First off, they can't stealthily tank. And it's not because they can't. It's just they can't because Wemby is going to win them more games than he should, right? Like the idea that we're going to tank and Wemby is going to be on the floor playing the same allotment of minutes, like it's just not going to, you're not going to lose enough because so many teams are going to be trying to tank. You're not beating Brooklyn to the bottom. You're not beating Washington to the bottom. Like you're not, I mean, Portland, Utah, you're not beating these teams to the bottom in that sense. And I think that's kind of the idea that they're trying to stealthily tank. If they are, and you know, like I've obviously having been in that organization, which feels like, I mean, it was forever ago. So it's massively changed since I was there. But the idea that they would stealthily tank would be like, okay, are you guys stupid? You can't unless you don't play Wemby at all. You know, or maybe go back to Point Sohan. But like I don't see that being I don't see that being a thing. So like everybody that goes like they're stealthily tanking, like not happening for all of that. And I think I like what they did. One, they got a point guard that can actually pass the freaking ball, which I love. I think
Trey's at Trey Jones over here, man.
Well, no, I mean I like Trey Jones as a backup. I don't know if he's a starting level point guard. And to be honest, I don't know if Chris Paul is a starting level point guard anymore. But I do know that Chris understands the assignment. Right? That big 7-foot alien dude, he needs the ball. And I will make sure he gets the ball. And I will get him post entry passes. I will get him on the pick and pops. I'll find him on lobs. I'll find like Chris's shooting days and stuff is not going to be good. It's not like they did a great job stretching the floor with his shooting or anything like that, but he's just going to get him the ball. I just that alone is worth a couple more wins. And so you have competent point guard play for really 48 minutes between him and Trey Jones for the most part. I like the Barnes pickup, just solid. You know, not like crazy high or anything like that. I think a lot of it's going to kind of depend on Devin Vassell's development in terms of what this team does. I think they're going to end up flipping Keldon Johnson at some point.
Ooh.
But I also just love the picks that they're getting.
Yeah.
Like everybody was mad about the Dillingham thing when they traded 8. I was like, yo, like they're actually thinking several steps ahead in the sense of like, hey, when we're good, Minnesota might be pretty bad. And that 2031 pick that we're going to get from them might really help, might be like a lottery pick when we're good. And I think that's kind of like almost a smart little thinking there with all of that stuff. I like Castle. I think Castle is going to be a really good fit for them. I don't know if he helps, right?
He was interesting to me when they didn't use their other pick because I thought they needed someone that probably had more of a proven jumper and or profiled as more of a I'm ready to set up others, quote unquote Wemby. And I just didn't. And again, I get like knee deep into the draft a few weeks before the draft, so I don't know enough about him. And there's some people that are very high on him. And I know defensively he might end up being a menace. I found that pick fascinating when they ended up not keeping their other one, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Like, hey, they went this way with that, so they'll get more offense with the 8th pick for that stuff. But I just think defensively they're going to be in a good position. I think offensively his game will develop to what they need it to be. They're always going to need more shooting. Mm-hmm. They're always going to need to find ways to stretch the floor and whatnot. And Castle might not be that guy, but in the long run, I trust that they will find those guys. And this is their last run in the lottery, most likely with their own pick, or at least probably so high in the lottery, I should say. They might end up in the lottery again next year, but I don't think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NBA. And I think they're just in a good position. I like what they've done. And it's funny to me that some people seem to be criticizing it. You know, this is probably the same group of people that were saying that, hey, man, like Wemby's upset, man, midway through the season. And then they better be careful. They might lose him. That whole thing. And I was like, are you guys drunk? Like, what are we doing here at that point? Like, it's just so silly that was such a topic of conversation, but I like what they've done. I like they brought in veteran guys.
I like what they've done. The Stephon Castle thing is the only one I have a question about, but I think that's just like, okay, you haven't seen him play in the NBA yet. Like you're going to have questions regardless. I loved their offseason, provided that just because they were linked to Lauri Markkanen, it's like it does seem like they might be ready to cash in some chips.
If they get Markkanen, trouble.
And the thing that I keep coming back to, and you hit on this when you said, even if they wanted to, short of shutting down Victor Wembanyama, they can't tank. When Wemby played with Trey Jones last year, and we both agree that Chris Paul, not what he was, but he's an upgrade over Trey Jones. The Spurs were a plus 5 points per 100 possessions with Wemby and Trey Jones on the court. It was better than that, but it was around plus 5. The offense was barely league average, so they're killing it on defense. When you add Devin Vassell into that assortment, they were plus 10 points per 100 possessions, and that's over like a 1,700 plus possession sample size. So that's not nothing. And now you've gotten, I would say, 2 NBA, well, Chris Paul, certainly NBA caliber. I know Kings fans, anyone who has Harrison Barnes on their team for like more than 3 years, so like they're done with Harrison Barnes, but like you have another NBA level rotation player who should be able to hit a 3. I think they're going to be better. I think they're planning on being better on purpose, and they didn't make a home run swing, but like you don't need to rush. Like we used to, remember how many people killed the Pelicans for trying to reorient around AD too quickly back in the day, making so many just short-circuity or short-sighted moves. So I do think, look, if they get Lauri Markkanen, I'll say
it's going to be a problem for everybody.
Like, I'll say inflammatory things, but by and large, I think I like the work they've done this offseason. I think it's smart to set themselves up with those stabs at the draft in the future because they're going to be too good to have high draft picks. So you either get to replenish your rotation with cheaper players, or you have these trade assets that just have this before they turn, they're going to have this mystique, like these swaps and these picks. So I've loved their offseason. Would I like to have seen them get Lauri Markkanen or take kind of a bigger swing? Yeah, sure. But like, I think they've done enough to say, no, I'm not prepared. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team. I'm with you. They probably end up in the lottery, just not high, but like they were a 20-something win team. I think that just Wemby's progression of growth coupled with if they get good health from their new additions, like this is a team that like could contend in like the mid 30s, and to have like a 12, 13, 14 win jump isn't nothing. And you mentioned Devin Vassell. I'll wrap up my point here before I throw it to you. I'm a huge Devin Vassell guy. And like we saw a little dip in his pull-up 3-pointer last year, still shot 46% on pull-up 2s, moves well without the ball, shot about 40% on catch and shoot 3s. His job gets a little easier with CP3 there to me as well. Even with Harrison Barnes opening the floor instead of Jeremy Sohan or even Keldon Johnson, who kind of fell off last year for them. So I love their top 2 guys to me, and Devin Vassell and Victor, like having those two, just like that's the future of your team. And I just think they're so well set up, not just for the future, but to maybe make like kind of a mini mega leap now.
Yeah. And I think everybody's they have to make a leap now. They have to make a leap now. Like, why? Why? Like, it's like they want them to take, because the thing is, if they take a home run swing and miss, like that sets you back. Let me just be honest with you. I'd be killing them if they traded for Trae Young. When that was a possibility where people were talking about Trae Young and he'd be a great fit for the Spurs. I said, no, the Spurs would be a great fit for Trae Young. He wouldn't fit with them. He wouldn't take them to another. That's the type of swing that you would give up assets for, and it wouldn't work in the long run. And I think that's the kind of stuff that, like, I think everybody's trying to rush and force them into this stuff. I really just like them being a little bit methodically slow, and there will be a time where they will have to take a swing, and it might be next summer, might be the summer after. I don't know. But they will take a swing, and then we'll decide then if it's a good swing or a bad swing. But I think it's one of those situations where they just didn't need to rush it. The dude won the Rookie of the Year, and finished second in Defensive Player of the Year.
He could have been the defense if like there wasn't just a generational defender in front. Like he could have won Defensive Player of the Year as a rookie. That's fucking wild.
But so then everybody immediately, okay, the Spurs have to make all these moves to contend for next year. None of the moves they can make now would make them a contender this year, short of like getting Paul George and LeBron and Clay in the same offseason, right? Like something.
Why didn't they just do that then?
Yeah, exactly. Because they don't want to, Dan. That was why. Nothing else. Had nothing to do with the possibilities of things.
I do agree that they didn't need to rush. I love watching Wemby so much that like I would have maybe done something a little bit reckless, but I'm perfectly fine with they didn't. The only thing I actually disagree with you with is it would have come down to cost for me, but I actually like the idea of Trae Young on this team. Not my top choice, but I thought, yeah, I would have. But I wouldn't have killed them for trading for Trae Young. I probably would have applauded them for rolling the dice. Not that they had to or that they should have, but I don't think it would have been a bad move.
Well, I'll tell you why I was against the Trae Young thing. Okay, one, you need a guy that's going to pass the ball to Wemby and understand it is Wemby's team and not his team. And Young, at his point in his career, would go to the Spurs and would think it's his team. And I wouldn't blame him. I would think the same thing.
Even going from like, I feel like it's one thing in Atlanta where you've been there the whole time and they've rebuilt around you, but going to a different team wouldn't shift his mindset at all. You don't think?
It depends on the team he goes to. If he goes to a young team, say if he went to Orlando, same situation, right? Because he's like, I'm the veteran here. I'm the guy here. I'm the one that has the experience. I made it to the conference finals 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? 3 years ago? I'm old now. I don't remember.
That was 2021. That was the last. Yeah, I think that was 2021.
So it's 3 years ago. Okay, so 3 years ago. And like I'm, I understand the NBA now at this point. Follow me. And and everybody's response was like, well, Wemby will be able to cover for him defensively. Sure. But like, I don't want a guy that's going to take touches away from Wemby. I don't want that.
Fair.
And I think that's the important thing there. And the ball's going to be predominantly in Trae Young's hands. And he has proven when they had DeJounte Murray in Atlanta, he doesn't do well off ball. So like when it goes to Wemby, he ain't going to be doing anything. And I think, so for me, the Trae Young thing was a mistake, but that's the kind of move they needed to stay away from. It looks like they're staying away from. And so I don't have to say much more about it and just accept the fact that you were probably wrong, Dan.
Speaking of Mo being wrong, we move on to the Minnesota Timberwolves. What have you made?
Right.
What have you made of their offseason? They add Joe Ingles, a great get at the minimum. They didn't. Everyone, or at least when I saw, and I'm assuming you thought the same way, that the Spurs had traded the number 8 pick to Minnesota. I was like, did they trade Jaden McDaniels or Karl-Antony? I was waiting for it to be a salary dump. No, they did what these other coward-ass franchises wouldn't, and they've at least leaned into the second apron for like this year. Maybe they'll trade out of it. They have the entire year to cut their payroll if things go up, but they go. And I don't know how to feel about the Rob Dillingham thing. That's what I really want to ask you about. Is it seems like they might rely on him to play. Like it feels like you make that move for it to have somewhat of an immediate impact. But what have you just made of how they've responded to the year they had last year? And now they lost Monte Morris. They lost Jordan McLaughlin. They lose Kyle Anderson, who was slow-mo. I love him. He was redundant on this team at this point. But what have you made of what they've done this offseason? How do you feel about how they've set themselves up for next year?
Yeah, just to start out, like I think the guys that they lost, I think the one they'll miss the most is Kyle Anderson, and I don't think they'll miss him as much as we think. And you were right in the way he's just redundant. I think the Dillingham move's interesting. I'm not a big college guy. I'm not a big draft guy. I haven't watched a ton, so it's not like I can give you an in-depth breakdown of what he brings to the table. But if they can get a little more pop off the bench, which is something I felt like was missing a little bit in that series against Dallas, I think that's kind of what they need. They needed that, and they needed another ball handler. Like, look, the Joe Ingles thing is, they got slow-mo. And I think that's kind of the deal. And I love Joe from my Australia days, just, one of my guys. But like, I don't know how much he's going to contribute on a regular basis to you in a way where you feel like, oh, wow, okay, it's contender. But I like that they're just not afraid. I like the move for Dillingham. Whether it works out or not, I don't know. But the aggression. Hey, there's this 8th pick out there. A team that was in the conference finals doesn't normally go and get that, and go get that lottery guy. And they didn't give up much to get him, and they gave up their future pick, which feels like a lot. But this is a team that's trying to win now.
Yeah, and I did just say fuck the future with these other teams, so I can't harp on that.
So I mean, like their attitude is like, hey, we have a window of maybe 2 to 3 years right now in this moment. We need to go try to win something right now. We were very close last year. We can't take a step back. Let's be aggressive. Like, I'm okay with that. It also wasn't like they gave up 3-4 picks, for all that stuff. And they have a lot of guys on their roster that should they decide to tear it down, they'll be able to turn them into pieces. I like what they've done. I like the aggression. I still look at them as one of the teams in the Western Conference to keep an eye on. I think they're right there. And if this Dillingham stuff works out and he really does provide some scoring, some pop off the bench for them, Like that's something they desperately needed when Edwards would go to the bench and Towns wasn't really hitting shots. I think this could have been a really nice pickup for them. Now, the important thing is they got to give him playing time throughout the season.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting is that they're built to insulate him defensively because he's on the smaller end. And the little I know about him, like if you're not worried about his size, like the dude is just going to score and generate shots, which is huge for them. But it's like, how do you're trying to win games, and there will be opportunities in the regular season, low stakes moments to get him minutes. But how do you like this is unique in the sense like not a lot of contending teams do this where they're trying to find higher stakes or medium stakes playing time for a rookie who he was the number 8 pick in a relatively weak class, but because you did trade the only future picks that you could do something with 2030 and 2031 at the moment, it does it actually suggest that they need something or they're going to try and get something immediately out of him? Or is it more of a long-term play to say, well, as this roster gets more expensive or we have to worry about Mike Conley leaving or make other decisions that we're just going to trust we'll have the defensive infrastructure to have him paired with Anthony Edwards. And like, we're thinking it's not necessarily about now. We're trying to think like 3, 5, 6 years down the line or something.
Yeah, I think, no, they're thinking now. You don't trade the 2031 pick and the swap and all that, like, unless you're trying to win now. Like, it's just that simple. Like, if this was a development play, I'd be like, okay, that's weird. So it'll come down. We'll see the alignment, front office and coaching staff, depending on how many minutes Dillingham kind of gets through the course of the season. But yeah, you have to try to develop this guy. You need him. Plain and simple. Now, like, is he going to be a make or break whether you win the championship or go to the finals or things like that? No, but he's a piece that's going to help you if you do this right. Like a lot of these teams, a lot like Denver, and I'm just picking on Denver all offseason. So I might as well do it here.
They gave Dario Saric a player option for some reason. Please explain that to me.
No, I'm not explaining that one. That one's tough to explain. Hold on, let me fix my mic. The Denver gave up all their guys. And, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, we know all that. And didn't really develop their young guys. Didn't give them, Mike Malone didn't really give them the time they needed. To Peyton Watson's, Julian Strother, who was pretty good, got hurt, then never could find his way back into the rotation. They're banging on Christian Brown. It's like they need to make sure they develop these guys. And that happens in season, in regular season games. By the time the playoffs roll around, if you haven't really put in that equity with those guys, you don't know what you have come playoff time. You're not going to feel comfortable as a coach to put them on the floor. Finch is going to have to play Dillingham so that he knows what he has in him come playoff time. And that's going to require minutes in every game. I'm not saying the kid's got to play 35 minutes or whatever or things like that, but it can't be just all garbage time. It can't be spot minutes here or there. Like, he has to have a spot in the rotation. Now, he has to earn it too in training camp, but you have to really kind of focus on that as an organization, because that's the guy that you traded stuff for him. So it's more than just the 8th pick. You have to really make it work.
Will that be a good signal for how in lockstep the front office and coaching staff are?
Absolutely.
Like, you can even look to his point, because like you look at Minnesota right now, they don't actually have, aside from, I guess, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you could run him for some backup point, but that's not ideal. You stagger Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, we saw that. But so it'll be a good signal of how in lockstep they are, just looking at how many minutes Rob Dillon and what type of runway they're giving him to work through the learning curve that he's going to be subject to.
Yeah, no, of course. I think that's a massive part, and I think we would talk about it on the Athletic podcast. It's the most important thing is alignment from ownership to front office to coaches to players. And you want that to be a straight line. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's in all that stuff. And yeah, if he's not playing, that's one of those things where you're looking at Chris Finch going like, hey man, like, the front office is like, we traded for this guy. We expect you to play him. Like, we think he can play. You got to do it. And Finch might be saying, I need veterans. I need a guy now to help me win games. I don't think he can. And so you kind of will understand it a little bit. And we're assuming now one way or the other. We'll get some answers once we start to see it. I mean, we've seen it with other coaches in the past. You're a Knicks guy. Tibbs, they traded for Cam Reddish, and Tibbs was like, I ain't playing him. Like, it just didn't. Like, that was like, you're just like, wow, they just lit a pick on fire.
This does seem like a move you make, though, when you are in alignment because of how much you did give up. And just like if you're looking at what Denver did, and I think they've done a great job developing Christian Brown, Peyton Watson's good, but like those are back end of the first round, beginning of the second round type guys. And when you trade for Cam Reddish, you're giving up like this whatever first round pick it ended up being. When you're giving up a 20 like draft 6-7 years into the future, like it's just a different level of like it feels like you better be in alignment. Otherwise, what is going on here? And with Denver, even it feels like a good case study might be okay. What happens in the playoffs? Because he played, Michael Malone played Christian Brown, Peyton Watson during the regular season, but you got to that. They ran into trouble during that Minnesota series. It was like, no, Peyton Watson, you are done. It's Justin Holiday season. And so it's like, are you going to have the stomach as Chris Finch? Because I do think it's valuable to get the playoff experience for these guys too. I'm going to be even more curious to see like if he runs into some trouble during the playoffs, how short is that rope for him?
Oh, for sure. And it's always short for coaches. Playoffs is short with veteran players, so it's even shorter with rookies.
Great point.
When it comes to playoffs. So it's like, so it's that stuff, but again, it's all that equity that's built up through the regular season too, though. Right. And if all he got is garbage minute in the regular season, he ain't playing in the playoffs, and I think that's going to be a big thing. And they need it. You saw it in that Dallas series.
Yeah. Sorry. It was the Dallas series. That was the one that
no, you were right. Relax.
Yeah.
You're fine. Don't worry. You're good. I got you.
Among the teams that we have not talked about, and I don't think that there's really there might be a nomination there, depending how high you are on the Spurs. Who's having the best offseason so far in the NBA?
I think it's two teams, and I think one's better than the other. I think Oklahoma City by far is having the best.
Which, as we record this, Mo, they still just have like almost $8 million to throw and a roster spot to throw at a free agent out there, where it's like, oh, no team's going to take, I don't know, Tyus Jones or Gary Trent. Like, we're just going to roll that salary. We're just going to take him just because.
Right. And I think but I think the Isaiah Hartenstein move was such a big one for them. And I think it kind of fills a need in terms of rebounding. I think his playmaking is huge. I think it's something that they could really kind of have some fun with that. I think he could play with Chet on the floor. I think he could play center and when they have to rest Chet, I think it gives them versatility. I think their biggest problem with lineup versatility, they could only play one way. I tend to criticize teams that only play one way. I think you need more versatility in your offense and your defense, and I think he kind of helps them in that regard. And again, just back to it again. And the more important thing is the basics. He will help you with rebounding, which is something they badly needed. And I was so annoyed with them for not getting a big man in the trade deadline.
Was Bismack Biyombo just not count anymore? What's going on here?
No, he doesn't. He didn't play. And barely did Gordon Hayward. Everybody who thought Gordon Hayward was going to be some amazing piece for Oklahoma City. And like, what are you guys doing?
You weren't even intrigued. Before he got injured last year, he was pretty good. I was at least intrigued because I don't actually think they've addressed their biggest need to me, which was that third guy who could because like the driving kick stuff is nice, but like after Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and then Jalen Williams, you're kind of hard up for these like scorers who could break down defenses, and they didn't really get anybody that could do that. But as you said, they added offensive rebounding, they added passing in Hartenstein, and I guess I might be discounting. I actually think you're right. They had the best offseason. It's not even close. But when I say they haven't filled their biggest void, it's like Aaron Wiggins will get better, J-Dub will even get better, and so even like they might just give the ball to Chet more at this point and see like what he could do on the ball. And that's how you get that sort of third guy who can break down defenses.
I mean, there's a lot of different mixes that you can do with it. And yeah, sure, they could use a third option. They're a team that we look at and it's like, hey, they have to win the championship next year. It's still pretty young. With all that, they have all those picks. Like they can go get what they need. In all honesty, with the picks that they have, they really want to, they can. Once they feel like they're in that situation, they'll go for it. But I mean, like, yeah, I wasn't intrigued with Gordon Hayward. Dan, he was washed.
I thought for the cost, I was intrigued. I was wrong, clearly.
I think Micic could have helped them more in the playoffs than Gordon Hayward did.
You're honestly not wrong about that, but
I mean, like, he could have given you another ball handler, another guy that can kind of penetrate and try to score. Like, I get why and all that stuff and things like that with what they did, but like, man, like to think like Gordon Hayward at this stage in his career was the missing piece is ridiculous when it was clear that you needed rebounding and you needed size. It was clear you needed that. And everybody said, no, I'm going to go on a rant because everybody was all, oh no, it's going to fuck up their spacing. They want to play 5 out and they don't want anybody to clog the lane. That's not how that shit works.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the important thing is like, look at Boston. Boston plays 5 out. They also play with a guard in the dunker spot. They also kind of move guys around and all of that stuff. They also rebound well. All 5 positions rebound very well for Boston. That's not the same for Oklahoma City. And their whole combat to we don't rebound well is, hey, it's okay. We force turnovers. Cool. You're dependent on it, the other team being idiots and turning the ball over so many times that it pays off for you. It changes in the playoffs. Like that works in the regular season on a night-to-night basis. Doesn't work necessarily in the playoffs. And I say that we have to understand full well. They had a great season. 1 seed, got a playoff round. Like that's improvement for them. That steps forward for them. In that sense, I just think they missed a window or they missed an opportunity to really even be better last season and take a further step forward at the trade deadline.
So I would push back and say I'm fine with the approach of they wanted more information of what this team looks like in the playoffs. They got it, and then they got rid of Josh Giddey. I think it was clear to all of us that he wasn't going to help them anyway. But I've said this to everyone who has said something along the lines of you had, most of it not as intelligibly, if you've said, what is the opportunity they passed on at the trade deadline? I've seen a lot of people throw out Daniel Gafford. Daniel Gafford was unplayable by the end of that Dallas-Oklahoma City series. He ended up helping the Mavericks. Okay, sure. I don't see if you're saying they should have created their own trade market and forced the Thunder to give them Larry Marketing, or there was another name that you had in mind then, I don't know if that was possible, but like at least people are identifying names. I don't see the opportunity that they passed on. I'm okay with them taking a shot on Gordon Hayward, not saying that you could have not done that. And you said maybe Micic helps you more in the playoffs at that point. I just don't see the player that they could, like, because Isaiah Hartenstein wasn't coming to you at the trade deadline.
No. Okay, there's PJ Washington was the guy they could have tried to make. They could outbid anybody, right? Like they could have made a run at PJ Washington, would have been an interesting fit for them.
Fair.
They could have made a run at
with the rebounding as much though as you're thinking though. Is like if that's their biggest need is that someone who's doing that
helps a little bit more than what they had. But then then if you really want to go for a big swing for the rebounding, man, make an offer for Andre Drummond with the Bulls. Like what was I mean? Like I know I know
they preferred to let him walk for nothing in the offseason, Mo. So why don't you just cross his name?
Well, looking at the Bulls as the smartest organization who had had offers for first round pick at the trade deadline for Caruso, instead gave him to the Thunder, which is also a name we forgot to mention, for just Josh Giddey and not get a pick back. Like, let's not look at the Bulls management as an organization of one that we should note as examples.
We mentioned the pick swap the Spurs got for taking on Harrison Barnes. The Bulls are just towing the tax line, like the way they built their roster. They couldn't even be the team that was like, well, we got the pick swap because we took back here because they just didn't have the cap flexibility. Just I feel bad for both fans.
But also adding Caruso to that team, to the Thunder, ridiculous. Like defensively, it's just like fuck.
And he took a lot of threes last year and shot like 40%.
No, he could play, man. The Lakers are still reeling from when they gave him up. It was funny. No, it was funny because like everybody outside. Look, first off, I totally understand Laker exceptionalism is the most annoying thing there is on
does it
Twitter
exist
or whatever.
They couldn't even get Jonas Valanciunas tells the Wizards.
No. But the fans constantly believing their guy. There was a run where they thought Steve Mikhailuk, or however you say his last name, was like this great hope. Was this great hope? There was a run of that. Like, I mean, they hype up all of their guys, but there was a run of people outside going like, hey man, this Laker fans are nuts about this Alex Caruso guy. He's not that good. He goes to Chicago and you go, oh wow, he's really freaking good. The Lakers are still reeling from giving him up. That was a dude they should have never let walked out the door for them.
I honestly don't think there's an organization that's devalued two-way players like that play both ends of the floor as much as the Lakers since they won their title. Just like a banner in incompetence when you look at roster building. You said you had another team, though, nominee for the best offseason.
I think we got to look at the Knicks, even though they lost Hartenstein. I think
that is not where I thought you were going to go. Please shower me with some Knicks love right here. I'm ready.
Well, I hate doing it on this podcast because of you, but the I like what they did with the Mikal Bridges stuff. Yeah, there's a little bit of holes and stuff that they need to kind of fix, and I think they need to find another center. Although I still think like Mitchell Robinson, Precious Achua, and then playing OG at the 5 is really something we're going to see quite a bit. As long as Tibbs doesn't run these guys into the ground, I think they're like, and that's yeah, he's going to. But
Yeah,
I
you
think
just
that,
gave this motherfucker Mikal Bridges, who's going to somehow play over 48 minutes a game.
but like when you just look at what they have in terms of perimeter defense and whatnot, like I just really like what they got. Like all those pieces defensively, it's going to be a tough ass team to play regularly. And if they can just find a way to get Randall to kind of buy in and be healthy, and I'm not trying to say he wasn't bought in last year, but like being that sort of that second scorer guy that could kind of alleviate some of the pressure off of Brunson, I think this team has a chance to be really good next year.
I love everything you said. And I actually think the two most important developments to watch are with Tibbs and Julius Randle, because I honestly, I think Tibbs might have more control over it than Randle. I like the way Julius Randle played for a lot of last year. I thought he did better at the accessory work before he got hurt. And so if he's able to play, to me, he's become more important because you decided to play your best trade chips on Mikal Bridges, who's, when you're talking about generating shots, he's probably a C+ shot generator. He's like an A++ role player. Will fit on the ball, off the ball. If he's your third, fourth option, the shot generation is fine. As a number 2, I don't think he's there. And I was open to him being that in Brooklyn, but I think it's clear that he can't be the 1 or the 2. So Randall becomes more important. But what you mentioned, I think is the big thing. Yeah, they probably want another big, but like, because you have OG, there's no excuse to not do the Randall quote unquote at the 5, where Randall's your offensive 5 and OG Anunoby is your defensive 5, because now that works. And because you have Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, like that is I think Tibbs, and we've seen him be a little bit more flexible, I think, this past year than in other years rather. But that is almost the key, where it's Randall to me has become more important because you played your best trade chips on someone who is not a shot generating all-star. And then 2, can you get to these hyper versatile lineups that you are built to field, but they do go against the grain of Tibbs's core principles? I do think he'll be more open though, because would you ever have guessed? Look at the size of the quote unquote 4s that Tibbs was playing last year, or like him playing all those small guards at once. That's not something I think that you ever would have predicted him to lean on. So I'm hopeful, but like I really feel like that's the only reason you trade for Mikal Bridges, is because you're prepared to go the lineup configurations that you hinted at, with it's kind of OG and Randall or your front line.
Yeah, I think that's something to expect. And I think that's what's going to be really just interesting with this squad. And because you want to play guys like Josh Hart, DiVincenzo, Bridges, you want to play those guys together. You're going to have to play smaller.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a big part of it too. So it's going to be interesting. I'll throw one more team out there, because this is the team you probably thought I was going to say. It's obviously Philly.
Yeah.
Right. Like I like what they've done. It's my only thing with Philly, and it's totally unfair, and I get it. And you guys can all criticize me for it. I get it.
They didn't resign Tobias Harris.
No. They need to be healthy. Like it's just how, like, I kind of feel funny for Paul George. Like Paul George leaves one dude that's often injured to go to another dude that's often injured by playoff time. So it's like they just need to make sure it's all going to come down to Embiid's health. On paper, I like what they've done. This is a really good team. I think it's going to be fascinating, but we just got to see it work on the court in terms of health, man. Because like that's really it.
Yeah, I mean, getting Paul George, is you have the cap space to do it. Good. You convince him to leave the Clippers. That's fine. I just love the work that they've been able to do independent of that, where the Caleb Martin signing was just a home run. He should probably fire his agent, it sounds like. And then keeping Kelly Oubre Jr. So I like the roster they have, and I would assume they're going to sign KJ Martin to a balloon deal, because they have all those first round picks to trade. And so at midseason, you have a basically human trade exception to attach to those picks. If they're healthy, do you think if both teams are healthy between the Knicks and the Sixers, and if you want to throw anyone else in there, that's fine, which one is the second best team in the East?
I think, just assuming health, I will probably go the Sixers, just because there's really no answer for Embiid once he's healthy.
And that's like top end talent, Maxey, George, and that's a lot of top end talent.
That's really tough to handle. Because I actually think the perimeter defense can handle those guys, but I don't think they have a guy that can handle Embiid. And to be fair, not a lot of teams do that can handle him, right? Like that's kind of why he was the MVP 2 years ago, if he didn't get hurt and played at the pace he was playing at this year, probably would have won the MVP again. Like, it's not a shock. So I think that's kind of I would go them and then the Knicks.
I'd probably pick the Knicks because they found what if Steph Curry could win Defensive Player of the Year and Deuce McBride. So I think that's just that has to be all the difference.
And that has nothing to do with the New York jerseys hanging behind you.
No. Look, there's a Magic jersey behind me. So
yeah, I know. I was ignoring that part.
Is there a team that had like an and if we talked about them already, that's fine. Is there that had like an under the radar good offseason that you were impressed by?
Well, it's the team we just mentioned, the Magic. I thought the KCP move was smart. They didn't do anything stupid or rash yet. It's July 8th. We have a whole offseason for something stupid or rash to happen. But I think they got a guy that can shoot. They got a guy that can defend. They got a veteran. They needed to improve their offense. They didn't get a guy that can just straight on the bounce create stuff and things like that. But I think that's fine. Again, because I don't think you necessarily need to do everything in one offseason. And if and I think that's kind of our mistake. So we want to fast forward everything. Soon as you get a guy, boom, everything's you got to be contender right freaking now. And it's bullshit because it takes time to kind of get there. And if you try to rush these things, you end up with a bad roster with money that you can't move. Like if they turn around and trade for Jordan Poole, yeah, I'll be pissed. Or something. But it's like, I just think it was a smart, decisive deal. It wasn't even a massive overpay. That's what it would cost for.
No, it was. I mean, the Nuggets should have paid him that.
Yeah, I'm shocked the Nuggets didn't match it. Like it's a very fair deal. Improves their shooting, guy that will shoot more because they need to get more threes up in general, and then it'd be nice if they can make a few. I think Franz will have a better year, and obviously they gave him that big extension. I think they'll be fine on the long run, and they can find that guy, that playmaker type guy that can kind of score for them or whatnot. I just think it was a smart move. I think it was very underrated. I think that's one of those moves that I think we'll be looking back later going like, damn.
Yeah, you reined me in because I've kind of, not that I've turned on their offseason, they're very TBD for me because if you weren't going to get, I wanted them to get one of someone who could create off the bounce or maybe organize their offense. And I love the KCP fit, but he doesn't do either of the things that we just mentioned. But as you mentioned, I don't hate anything they did. I think the Franz Wagner extension to me was completely unnecessary at this point. I would have made him prove it if that's what he was asking for. But I didn't, the Jonathan Isaac contract, good piece of business from them. Gary Harris, super cheap. So I don't hate what they've done. From the moment they signed KCP, I just thought there was going to be more fireworks. And as you said, we're recording this on July 8th. There could still be stuff happening, but I wanted to see them add to kind of not insulate, but streamline things for Paolo and Franz, someone who could either create for themselves on the ball more and or create for others. And they still don't have that. But as you mentioned, not only can you slow play it, but this is a team where you can get organic improvement from Franz, from Paolo, even from Jalen Suggs. Maybe Jalen Suggs is that guy.
Yeah, and I just think, again, too, the other thing was who was the guy out there that you were like, okay.
Anthony Simons.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
At Mo Dakhil _NBA. Go tell him he's wrong, folks.
Yeah, and then I will come back at all y'all later when I'm right.
2 years from now when I text you again to come on the podcast.
Yeah, every 2 years. No, I just listen, Simons is fine, but let's just be honest. If we really want to talk about what Simons is, he's a six man.
No,
scoring man off your bench. No, he is on a good team, on a championship level team, on a team that's going to try to be a contender. That's what he is. Let's just stop with the bullshit. Let's just stop pretending that these guys are all of these things. The only guy that's really kind of broken that mold is Tyrese Maxey, and his team hasn't even gotten out of the second round, no fault of his own. I'm not saying Simons is a superstar. I'm saying he could hit pull-up threes, hit catch and shoot threes in volume, and create a little bit for others off the bounce. We didn't need them to get a star. He's not even going to create a bunch off the bounce. He's not that great of a creator. They need a guy that can kind of, who would have been fun for them would have actually been CP. But but again, also like old or whatnot, probably wouldn't have
He
helped with
probably
the
would have
shoot.
shrunk the floor, not shrunk the floor, but I don't know if he
But
would
would
have
have
improved
the
their
spacing would
spacing.
have gotten harder. The shooting stuff is the concern with Chris nowadays. But like along, you know who I'd love on that team is Tyus Jones.
He's still floating around out there.
Yeah. But I mean, like, that's a dude that can get you in your offense, can streamline everything you want, is a good point guard, very steady, very reliable. You don't need to go get the flashy name, the flashy guy that can do all this pull-up scoring or whatnot. You don't need that.
I guess we just so I agree, but that's kind of where my disappointment's born from a little bit. Is I would have loved to have seen them gone the Tyus Jones route even, and I don't
Still
view
available.
Anthony Simons as some mega move. I view him he's on a fine contract. Even if you think he's gonna be a sixth man type, like okay, he would have infused some real offensive like zip into this team. So I was looking at it from I didn't need to see him go all in. I just don't view Simons as an all in move. I thought that was just like a tidy little okay, we can do this.
But that's going to cost them assets that I think you can use elsewhere and for a better player.
Which team were you think so far? That's the qualifiers. Are either having the worst offseason or you're most disappointed by right now?
Well, I think the obvious one is Denver. Like we've crushed on them already, but like honestly, you couldn't find the $7 million a year more for KCP. Like, what are you doing? Like, I'm not going to go into much more detail with that. I just thought you can't lose him, man. You had the best starting unit in the NBA, and you just lost a piece. And it is a very fair contract. The other two teams that I think, like, oh boy, like Laker Town, good luck, man. The draft worked out fine for you, but after that, in free agency has been a disaster.
They're $45,000 under the second apron because LeBron was generous and took a excellent PR work by LeBron and Clutch Sports, by the way. Just excellent PR.
That's fine. I don't even care about it, but that's fine. Like, but just this roster is not good enough, plain and simple. And we knew that whether Darvin Ham was the coach or JJ Redick's the coach, the roster is not good enough. And everybody around them got better. And then the other team I'm kind of disappointed about, and this actually led to some people being mad at me on Twitter. Is the Bucks. Like, I just don't know what the plan is.
What were they supposed to do, though?
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what name it is that they need to go get. But you talked about how the Warriors were clever around the roster moves and stuff. Like, you do need to kind of get creative. You need to find ways to get guys. Try to find a way to get a guy like a Dorian Finney-Smith or something. Or make a move. Like, there's no major move. And when I say what are they supposed to do, they're not going to make a major move. But it's moves around the edges. Like, really, Taurean Prince is the big name. DeLon Wright, like, okay, and now we're going to go. Like, I get it. Giannis was hurt. I think they win the first round easily if Giannis is healthy. But a Dame a year older, and everybody's just banking on the fact that, okay, but one full year under Doc, with Dame and Giannis and the whole offseason, which they won't because Giannis is at the Olympics. That's going to be awesome to see him with Greece in the Olympics and all that stuff. But like, I just want to see them. They need to get younger and they need to get more athletic. And I need to find a way for that. They need to find ways to go do it. And for everybody that's going to scream to me of give me a name, that ain't my fucking job.
Would you have, so I would agree with you in the sense that if they could have used the picks that they had this year, and if they had to dangle a distant pick and they could have been in on Alex Caruso, but we know the Bulls wanted Josh Giddey for some reason, or if they even could have gotten Ayo Dosunmu with a package like that, I'd be with you. But I was kind of against, and I'm not saying you're saying that they should have, but like the reporting that they were willing to move Chris Middleton or Brook Lopez, I never even saw the scenario where that would have necessarily, like, if you trade Brook Lopez, you're kind of changing the whole way that you're going to defend. And that was shaky to begin with. And so it's just like, would you have, if you could have traded this, the money wouldn't have matched up, but if you could have traded Chris Middleton to Memphis for GG Jackson and Marcus Smart, like, is that like, is your team, maybe they're a little bit better balanced, but are they actually better? I just don't know. It feels like their original sin was, and I actually think the Damian Lillard trade could still work out for them, but they were so hamstrung. I don't know what they were supposed to do other than like only having minimums and winding up with Taurean Prince and DeLon Wright is actually a pretty good outcome for them, in my opinion.
Right. But okay, let me just put it to you this way. They ain't defended that much on the perimeter.
No, I agree with
you. I don't think they trade Lopez. I don't think they should. I think it's crazy. I think it's stupid with all that stuff. But like, the guy they drafted seems more like a project, and you have a coach that's not going to play projects. We know damn well they're not going to play Andre. He didn't play Andre Jackson a lot of minutes last season. That's a dude I want to see play more. And maybe my complaints more with Doc than the front office and whatnot. But I want to see this team need to have gone into this offseason not thinking we could stand still. Right. And if we needed to be a little bit creative without hurting our base of our team, and I'm with you, I wouldn't have traded Middleton. I wouldn't have traded Lopez. But maybe if I got to trade Bobby Portis, I trade Bobby Portis. He's a fan favorite. But like whatever, like you got to find ways as a front office. And when I say it's not my job, front office has to find ways to be clever about it and go make and make whatever ancillary moves to fix what's around the edges. They're still not good enough on the perimeter defensively. They're not going to be good enough against Boston on the perimeter. I don't think they're going to be good enough against New York on the perimeter. They're going to have problems against Philly. Like I don't understand when you're looking at that stuff and looking at it and just say, cool, we're just going to stand still. Their defense was awful last year. Some of it was Adrian Griffin. It's got better a little bit under Doc, but still, it's not like their offense was such ass kicking that we all thought. And Dame had a down year, but also Dame's old. He's getting old. Like it's not really a thing. Like I'm just curious when I look at the Bucks, like what are you guys trying to do? Where are you trying to get a little bit better? Like what's what's the game plan? How are you going to get better? Listen, I could be wrong. If they play Andre Jackson 20 minutes a night throughout the rest of the season, I'll shut the fuck up.
Yeah, they probably have a different head coach at that point, though, right?
If that's right. Like Doc's just not playing these dudes. And I think it matters that they need to play these guys because they need the athleticism and they need the youth. And I think that's just an important aspect of that team. But while talking about them, I thought of one other team that flew under the radar that I think deserves some real love. And that's the New Orleans Pelicans.
I was going to ask you which team are you following most closely for the rest of the summer and why is it the Pelicans? Because they would have been my pick for that question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like the Murray move. I like DeJounte Murray for them. We got to see what they do with Ingram, right? Like that's still up in the air, and we got to see if they bring him back, if they move him, they flip him. I like that they got Daniel Tice, like as just a backup big situation for them. I like that move for them.
Would he technically start at the 5 for them right now? Like who else?
He could, but I think I'd go with Zion at the 5. But I think they have some stuff, like if they want to try to move off of Trey Murphy, I think they can get some stuff for him and kind of add some value. I'm just curious to see what they do with Ingram and even to a lesser degree CJ.
They are my most fascinating team for the rest of the offseason because of Ingram, because there's this, I don't want to say a giant hole, but there's a clear move to be made to diversify your front court rotation after giving up on Larry Nance Jr. I wouldn't trade Trey Murphy unless we're talking about getting like a real megastar in here. I just don't know who
Anthony Simons.
Yeah, like him. I'd probably trade Zion and Trey Murphy and Herb for Anthony Simons. I just don't know who like the player is, if there was a way. But the other thing they did that was complicated is they're only now built to make a mega move. And by that, I mean, like you gave away your medium matching salary for the most part in the DeJounte Murray deal. And so now it's like, they'd be an interesting team to take a flyer on Robert Williams III because the Blazers have like 95 bigs on their roster right now. But like getting to his money without moving Ingram and McCollum is basically impossible for them right now. So I'm so fascinated by them because I feel like there's a lot of work to be done and decisions to be made. And they're all like, any changes that get done or decisions that get made, they all feel seismic because of just like the scale at which they have to happen at. It's the Ingram extension. If he doesn't sign it or you can't find a number, now you have to look at this move. And what's the market for Ingram? What's the team that wants Atlanta didn't want Ingram in the Murray trade. So it's just, they're fascinating on so many levels. I don't think they've had a bad offseason, to be clear. I'm probably higher on them than most. I love the DeJounte Murray fit, but I don't actually know the way you kind of feel about the Bucks. The Pelicans aren't stuck. I'm probably higher on the Bucks than you, but agree that they're kind of spinning their wheels a little bit. I'm just so curious to see where the Pelicans go from here. I don't think a lot of their fans think they're going to trade for Jared Allen. I think Brandon Ingram's a terrible fit in Cleveland. So I just don't see that.
They're not trading for Jared Allen. Cleveland's not trading Jared Allen.
No, they shouldn't. Kenny Atkinson knows how to use them, and their core 4, they just weren't healthy enough to really gel last year. It's weird that they got worse compared to year 1 together, but I like that. But my point being is just, I know that you're saying it's not our job to identify the names, but like I can identify the needs. I just have no idea how they go about addressing them right now.
Yeah, and the reason why I say when it's not our job is because every now teams make moves where I go like, wow, I didn't know that was available to them. That's a great trade. Like that was I was fine with the Dame trade. Like I had questions for Phoenix's end of everything, but but like I was fine for that. Like the team had run its course. And granted, like, yeah, maybe you should have tried to find a way to make sure Drew Holiday doesn't end up in Boston by.
Well, they didn't want to tell him that he was getting traded, so that secrecy ended up biting them in the butt. It seems like. So
yeah, well, I mean, that's what happens when you try to do fake. You try to be like a little shady with it. It ends up hurting you. But I think we don't know what's going to be available for them and what the offers are for Ingram. And whatnot. So it'll be fascinating to see how that kind of plays out. And remember, like we value guys a certain way. It takes one team to evaluate them differently.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And for us, and whether that's an overpay, underpay, what did they get enough for it? Did they get enough for it? All that stuff that we would debate after every trade. Like it just takes one team, one GM to be like, I'm in on Ingram. I think he's going to work great at team X.
But from your, just because you're so good at what you do and with your background, is there a team that you actually like, Brandon? I've seen Utah floated, like Kessler and John Collins, maybe draft equity for Ingram. I'm just like, if the Jazz are going the route we think they're going, Brandon Ingram is just a weird fit contractually, functionally for what they're, and I think Brandon Ingram's a really good player. He can make some difficult shots. We've seen the flashes of passing. He can be good defensively at points, but he's one of those players where he's hard to fit in, to me, into a larger ecosystem. And so if you're not going to build things around him, which I don't know that he's good enough for you to do that, I just don't know which team that makes sense for.
Yeah, I think he is a hard guy to place on a team, right? Like we're all kind of looking at it. It's like, I kind of sit around and look at teams, and I don't know where is the Ingram team that makes them, that's like a good, like this is really good. And we're okay. This team's making a leap of some sort, while you were talking, Houston popped in my head and I'm like, I don't know, like it's interesting, but I don't know. And I think that might just be the curse of Ingram, and that's kind of it. Maybe like, I don't love it, but maybe Charlotte's where you look at him, but it's like, I don't feel like a contender is looking at him and going like, oh, we need Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can make this work in that regard. I don't know. And it's like if Milwaukee turned around somehow and traded for Ingram without trading the core four, I'd be into it.
They can't. Second apron. Can't aggregate calories. Over.
Right. So it's like, but it's like, again, so it's like,
what about Memphis?
I just want to see Memphis healthy with Ja right now. Like I want to see them fully healthy. Memphis would be interesting. I'm just stuck on the Zach Edey thing with Memphis, but
that picture of him dunking on his tiptoes.
It's just funny. Memphis might be a good spot now that you bring him up, and I kind of think about it there. Like that's not a bad one there for him, where he can kind of play a role there with Ja and things like that. It's just he's so one-on-one centric,
mm-hmm.
And it's like maybe it's him in the second unit. Like he's obviously a starter, but
right.
Like he really kind of gets to shine more with the second unit. Like that would be the thing you'd have to figure out.
Are there any other teams or players or moves or something we haven't talked about that you would like to discuss?
No, I'm tired of talking with you, Dan.
Well, you're not out of here yet. You have 2 minutes left because you agreed to do the stat padding portion of the podcast.
Oh, I did?
When I sent you the outline, you said it looks good.
Yeah. Hindsight 2020. I didn't really look at it. I got you. Go for it.
Typical for you. So the way this works is you don't really even have to give justification to your answers. You can if you want, briefly. I'm just going to ask you which of these teams are going to be better? Are they going to be better or worse next season? As of right now, July 8th. So Mo, will these NBA teams be better or worse in 2024, 2025? The Golden State Warriors,
Slightly better.
the Phoenix Suns,
Worse.
the San Antonio Spurs,
Better.
the Miami Heat,
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to go worse.
the Philadelphia 76ers,
Better.
the New York Knicks,
Better.
the Orlando Magic.
Better. This is like the math's not going to work for the number of teams I've said better already.
Don't worry, it gets harder.
Okay, good.
The Los Angeles Lakers,
Oh, worse.
the Milwaukee Bucks,
Worse.
Minnesota Timberwolves.
Better.
Will the Boston Celtics be better or worse, Mo?
That's such bullshit, but they're going to be they're like better is like a 70-win team. Like that's kind of the thing of how dominant they're. I'll say they'll be worse just because I think the East will be a little bit better.
The Los Angeles Clippers,
Worse.
the Cleveland Cavaliers,
Better.
the Dallas Mavericks.
Like, do we grade them on being a finals team or do we grade them on being the 5th seed in the West?
It's not even where will they just be, because progress isn't linear. So they could be a better team and not make the finals if you want to frame it that way.
Right. I'm gonna go with better.
The New Orleans Pelicans.
Incomplete. We got to see what happens with Ingram. I refuse to answer.
Coward. Oklahoma City Thunder.
I'll text you later.
The Oklahoma City Thunder.
Better.
The Denver Nuggets.
Worse.
The Sacramento Kings.
Slightly better.
The Indiana Pacers.
Worse.
The Houston Rockets.
Better.
The Utah Jazz.
Worse. That by choice, they want to be worse. Like they are trying to be bad.
And finally, will the Toronto Raptors be better or worse?
Worse.
Ooh. I just tend to be higher on them than most. You're probably right. Mo.
Well, still, it's the thing with the Raptors is we always like, I think Scotty Barnes is good. I'm not a big Emmanuel Quickley guy. Hey, you're a former Knicks guy. I get every Knicks person.
I liked him better on the Raptors for the most part in the role that they had him running.
He's fine. I think they're going to be worse.
Mo, thank you for giving me over 90 minutes. Are you just able to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the fantastic work that you put out?
Just follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, MODAKHIL_NBA. That's where I'll be tweeting stuff. Olympics are coming, so I'll probably have opinions there. If not, I'll probably just be tweeting random stuff until the season begins.
Congratulations again on your pending nuptials. Tell Luca with a C I said hi, and as you know by now, I will be pestering you again a few years from now. It seems like, based on our
I can't wait to do this again in 2 years.